Okay, Parsha Ki Tisa. The title of our Dvar Torah today is Aveira Lishma, sinning for the sake of heaven. What do we mean by this? Okay, so there is a pasuk in the Parsha that talks about Moshe breaking the tablets. In the aftermath of Moshe breaking the luchos, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, Pisol lecha shnei luchos avanim karishonim. Hashem tells Moshe, hew or fashion a new set of tablets. V'chasavti al haluchos es hadivarim asher hayu al haluchos harishonim asher shibarta. And I will write on the new tablets the very same words that were on the original tablets, asher shibarta, that you broke. Our sages look at those words, asher shibarta, as superfluous. Obviously, you broke them, Moshe. Otherwise, we wouldn't need to write have a new set of tablets. So, what does God mean when He says Asher Shibarta? The Talmud, in a number of places, one example is in Masechet Shabbat, says that Uminalan dihiskim Hakadosh Baruch Hu al yado. From where do we know that God agreed or sort of endorsed Moshe's action of breaking the luchos? Because at face value, it would seem that what Moshe did was completely of his own initiative, not something that we think God would necessarily agree with. God didn't tell Moshe to break the luchos. Moshe sees what the people are doing and they break it. We have no idea whether God is happy with Moshe from doing this or not. So the Gemara says, how do you know that God assented and God endorsed it? Shene'amar asher shibarta, from the words that you broke, which can be read in a different way. V'amar Reish Lakish, the sage Reish Lakish said, Yishar kochacha sheshibarta. So Asher could be read as Yasher koyach. Asher, Yeyasher. Asher, Yeyasher. So Yeyasher kochacha sheshibarta. Shkoyach Moshe, that you broke the luchas. That's how our sages say that we can draw from the text that God endorsed Moshe's activity. Now, this is not clear, and it's not necessarily agreed upon. This is Reish Lakish's interpretation. Take a look at a conflicting or a seemingly conflicting midrash. Re'ei shvacho shel Moshe. The Medrash in Shmos Rabbah says, take a look at the how great Moshe was. Aharon v'shivim zikenim achuzim biyadav shel Moshe v'lo yachlu lo. That Aharon and the 70 elders were grabbing Moshe's hands while he was walking down about to break the tablets. Look at the imagery that the Midrash is creating. It's not Moshe walking down himself and seeing the people and just going, I've had enough, and throwing them down. It's the elders are with him, Aharon, and the 70 elders are with him, they're surrounding him. They see what he's about to do. And they grab him. They say, Moshe, stop! Don't do this! And yet they were not able to overpower him. He was so strong in his resolve that he was able to break them despite their efforts to stop him. V'lo elu bilvad, ela af ritzono shel hakadosh baruch hu haya shelo yishaberem. But God also wasn't just the 70 elders and Aharon. It was God himself who originally did not want Moshe to break the tablets. Moshe, what are you doing? And Moshe insisted, and that very same Medrash says the same thing as the Gemara, that eventually God said, okay, you're right, it was the right thing to do. But only as an afterthought. Originally, Hashem was also horrified that his tablets should be broken. Now think about it for a second. It's the tablets are the holiest physical object in the world, holier than a Sefer Torah, arguably, right? And so you would think that anyone who's going to try and destroy a Sefer Torah, we have to be horrified at the prospect. We would do whatever we can to stop him. And yet, Hashem says, okay, finally, Yishar Koch. I think that's part of the construction, Annette. Anyway, okay.
This is a silly question.
Yeah.
You break something in a split second. How do you see someone going to break something?
The Medrash views it as Moshe must have motioned in some way or said something that indicated that he was about to break the luchos. So they like, wait, stop, you know. They all tried to grab him, and it didn't work. So something's going on over here where God finally endorses what Moshe is doing and says it's the right thing. And there's actually a deeper issue here because, you know, normally we think that the way that Moshe Rabbeinu's thinking in breaking the tablets was in order to sort of protect the Jewish people. The way the conventional understanding is that if we have these tablets, they are so dissonant from your behavior that the tablets themselves are the greatest prosecution against the Jewish people's behavior of building the golden calf. So in order to save the Jewish people, I need to break the tablets so at least I can protect them from the punishment that is inherent in their blatant violation of the Aseres HaDibros and fashioning a foreign god. That's the conventional understanding of why Moshe broke the Luchos. But there's a deeper understanding that's suggested by Reb Tzadok HaKohen. Reb Tzadok HaKohen Milublin, the great 19th century Hasidic commentator, who was a student of the Ishbitzer and of the Kotzker, and he writes like this. He says, "V'chol chet hador tzarich liot gam berosh hador shemetz mimenu." He says, and this is a larger essay in a sefer that he wrote called Takanat HaShavin, which is all about the concept of doing tshuva. And he has a section there called Avera Lishma, of sinning for the sake of heaven. And he says that every sin of a generation has to exist, that aspect of sin has to exist within its leader as well. Ki kol Yisrael komash leima v'rosh hador kolel kol hador parnas lefi hador ki yadua. He says because the leader sort of embodies and represents what is contained within the people that he is leading. And as a result, if an entire community is guilty of a sin, the leader has to have some aspect of that sin contained within him as well. Ucheshevirat Moshe Rabbeinu alav hashalom haluchot b'chet Yisrael be'egel. And he says this, therefore, is the connection between the Jewish people building a golden calf and Moshe breaking the tablets. In other words, there is a semblance of connection between the two actions. That Moshe Rabbeinu's breaking of the Luchos was in some way resemblant to the act of building and worshiping a golden calf. Now what does that mean? He says, because Shezeh Gam Chet Me'ein Dugma, Aval Hu Kivein L'Shem Shamayim, that this was also some way resemblant to it, but Moshe's intentions were for the sake of heaven. Now, can anyone imagine in what way is the breaking of the Luchos similar to the golden calf?
Passion.
What's that?
Passion.
It's a crime of passion, okay. True, good.
Well, they're both doing something they shouldn't do.
Well, but that's a little bit too broad, I think. Yeah. Why did the Jewish people build a golden calf? Those of you who were with us at the beginning of the Kuzari in the first essay, what was their objective in building the golden calf? They didn't mean to rebel against Hashem, but they wanted some kind of representation. They wanted some kind of animal or icon that would help them focus their attention. They needed something physical to help them focus their attention on the worship of the infinite. And they felt, without going into too much detail, this was their objective. They knew that it was wrong to have any graven images, but they said, look, the ends justify the means. Our objective is not to use this graven image as any competing entity with the ultimate deity of God, but we just feel that in order for us to be able to serve this disembodied God who's part of the infinite realm, we need to bring something physical into our realm. So it's really, this was their Avera Lishma. This was their sin for the sake of heaven. Their argument was the ends justify the means. This was their Avera Lishma. So in some way, Moshe Rabbeinu's sin was also an Avera Lishma. I know it's wrong to destroy a Sefer Torah. It's even more wrong to destroy Luchos. but I have to protect the Jewish people, and if the ends justify the means, so be it. And in that sense, they are similar in some way. So he says, when God told Moshe afterwards, Shkoyach, that you broke the luchos, Az pa'al slicha v'chapara gam li Yisrael. That is what achieved forgiveness to the Jewish people as well. Why? Ki nitbarer degam chetam haya ke'en avera lishma. Because what Moshe was essentially doing was not only revealing that my intention was for the good, but in a similar vein, the Jewish people's intention in making a golden calf was also for the greater good. Their intention was not to rebel against you, Hashem. They just chose the wrong means of trying to become closer to you. And that's exactly what I was doing when I broke the luchos. I wanted the Jewish people to remain your people, and so I did something sinful. But it really was for the sake of heaven. V'chein bedor Eliyahu, hutzrachu lahakriv bachutz, shezeni krak hagoyim uchederch uvdei avodah zara. And in this week's Haftorah, we read about the story of Eliyahu on Mount Carmel, which we've discussed in previous years, where he makes a tournament with the Baal to prove that God is the only true God, and he constructs an altar outside the temple, which is clearly not halachically correct. And our sages point out to us that he did so based on a special divine directive of Eis Lasos Lashem. It was an exceptional situation where God gave him a dispensation to do it, but it had all of the appearances of being something totally sinful that you're not allowed to do. You're not allowed to build an altar outside the temple. As a matter of fact, building an altar outside the temple is indicative of some kind of avodah zarah act, of idolatry. Avalhu asa miforash bidvar Hashem u'l'shem shamayim. But he did it with God's consent, and he did it for the sake of heaven. Va'al yedei zeh matzah makom lit'on gam ba'ad Yisrael. And it is because he did that, he was then able to defend the Jewish people by telling God, Ve'ata hasibota et libam acharanit, that God, it's partially your fault, Hashem, that the Jewish people have strayed and moved after Baal. Shegam chetam hu al yadcha va'ata ratzita shiyasu kein. In other words, ultimately suggesting that God, you sort of wanted the Jews to commit this activity, so that you can't really blame them entirely. It was also a type of aveira lishma, that they were fulfilling your will ultimately by turning towards Baal, because you coaxed them and you encouraged them to do this. Ve'al korcham haya sheyasu kirtzonecha, delo yomru avda dezaki lamari upala orer tshuva bekerev kol Yisrael. And really, basically, what Eliyahu was arguing is that they were in some way pushed into doing this because of your influence, Hashem. And essentially, this objective was to generate that they should feel a sense of tshuva. Mikol makom lo niftaru min ha'onesh b'olam hazel chatim ha'gdolim ha'em. But even though Eliyahu was successful, and even though Moshe was successful through his act of breaking the luchos, God did not completely destroy them, but he didn't completely forgive them either, because ultimately when you commit an aveira, even if it's an aveira lishma, you still have to pay the price. So, and then he goes on and discusses what their ultimate penalty was. But the idea that Reb Tzadok is trying to point out is that Moshe Rabbeinu had tremendous focus and purpose when he broke the luchos. This wasn't just, oh, they're not ready for the luchos and we have to break them to protect them. This was, my action in and of itself is an aveira lishma, and it will help Hashem to sympathize more with the Jewish people who have also committed an aveira lishma. And sometimes God, an aveira lishma is necessary in order to be able to achieve the greatest good. Not that you get off completely scot-free, but that Hashem realizes that we're very, very complex beings, and sometimes we have to do things that go away from Yiddishkeit, but at the end of the day, hopefully those things will bring us back. And even something as heinous as the Chet HaEgel, as the sin of the golden calf, Moshe Rabbeinu is able to defend because the people ultimately are not trying to go away from you, Hashem. They're just going about their attempt to reach you in totally the wrong way. And that's the function of the leader, is to say to Hashem, don't destroy them. Don't distance yourself completely from them. Of course they were wrong, but they were sincere. And they were trying. And just like my breaking of the luchos was really done for the sake of Klal Yisrael, and I know that it's incorrect, but I needed to do it in order to save them, you have to appreciate that that's where the Jewish people are at this point. Okay. We have a similar idea from the Shalach HaKadosh in talking about the people who are exempt from going out to war. And he says, Zehu, if you take a look at source number 5, we're coming into the middle of a discussion. He says, Zehu ma'amar rabotenu zal, leka ketuva de lo ramu batigra, ad kan lashon harikanti. He quotes first Rabbi Menachem Rikanati, who is a Kabbalistic medieval commentary to the Chumash. The Rikanati quotes a lot from the Ramban, who he views sort of as his forebear in Kabbalistic thought on the Chumash, and he goes even further. And he says that many times Chazal tell us that there is no ksuva that doesn't have fighting. In other words, no matter how joyous and holy an occasion is, there's always going to be some little knetch. There's always going to be some little snag that's going to interfere with the perfection of it. And Klal Dvarav, he says, what Rabbi Menachem Rikanati means to explain here is as follows. B'mi she'oleh lama'ala v'ligdula, that when a person elevates himself to greatness, in a spiritual greatness, az mitgarebo hasatan v'oleh umikhatreg, that is exactly the time when the Satan comes and tries to interfere and bring a person down. Al kain hakohen ish hachesed siva sheyachzor. And that's why, after a person has gotten married, the Satan says, if you've just gotten married, it's a dangerous time for you, because you've just elevated yourself in a state of holiness. You've got to retreat from war, because the Satan is going to try and confound your success. When a person first gets married, when a person builds a house, when a person plants a vineyard, the Torah says, you are exempt from going out to war if you've just experienced a new milestone in your life that allows you to become spiritually closer to Hashem. And so the Kohen would make that announcement, Miha'ish asher bana bayit v'lo chanacho yelech v'yashov leveito, who has built a new house? Let him go home. Miha'ish asher eras isha v'lo lekacha yelech v'yashov leveito. Who's a person who's gotten engaged and hasn't yet had a chance to live as husband and wife? You go home. Because you're embarking on something great and monumental in your life. That is the time that is most dangerous for you, where you are in most danger of being harmed by the Satan, the Yetzer Hara. And that's what Chazal mean when they say that when you're embarking on something great, like a marriage, there'll always be some kind of snag. There'll always be some kind of problem. And he says, "V'chatav od sham ve'al kein tiknu lishbor hakos bishat hachupa." And that's the reason why our sages have this custom of breaking a glass at the chuppah. He says, "Perush kedei latet l'midat hadin chelko v'al yedei kein v'olata kaftzapia." He says, give God's attribute of justice its due, meaning do something destructive at the chuppah. This is, does anyone know why we break a glass at the chuppah? The simple understanding of why we break a glass at the chuppah is what? Zecher l'churban, right? We don't want to be completely happy. We have to always remember that we don't have a Beis HaMikdash. The Shalah says that the deeper reason is that we have to do something destructive in order to give the Satan his due. The Satan is looking for some defect in our monumental behavior of spiritual ascent, And what we do by breaking a glass is doing something destructive, which is not normally what a Jew is supposed to do. You're not supposed to destroy things. We destroy a glass in order to sort of say, okay, here's my Aveira Lishma. Here's my sin for the sake of heaven. That there, you need something, you need me to show you that I'm not perfect. Okay, I'm not perfect here. So, and that's how the wrath of the Satan goes away. V'chein haya inyan b'matan Torah, and that's exactly what happened at the time of the giving of the Torah. Shehayu Yisrael hakadosh baruch hu kechala lechatan. That the Jews at the time of Matan Torah like were a bride and groom. Kitreik hasadan b'netinat haluchot, and the Satan prosecuted against them and complained about the Jews when God gave the luchos to Moshe. Ki haya yarei ki kishiyu aluchot b'Yisrael az yitbatel mitziat Satan shu hamavet. Because the Satan was scared that the Jewish people would be catapulted into absolute greatness to the point where they would be immortal. V'shalta ayin hara shelo b'hasatat ha'egel v'az nishtavru haluchot. And that's what caused them to fall into this abyss of the sin of the golden calf. And that's why the tablets were broken. Essentially, what the Shalosh is suggesting is that the breaking of the tablets is like the breaking of a glass at a chuppah, which is a beautiful imagery. If you ever are looking for a Devar Torah for a wedding this time of the year, this is a beautiful Shalal Kodesh, and it can be taken in many different directions. But the point that I think he's saying, at least in association with Reb Tzadok, is that no event in life that is truly great and monumental and brings a person to a new milestone of spiritual greatness can ever be realized without this Aveira Lishma. Because of our flawed nature, because of our humanity, invariably there are going to be situations where things are not going to go perfectly. And as long as we can channel our negativity towards at least being l'shem shamayim, in this way we'll be able to prevent being brought down from those flaws that are part of the human condition. So the golden calf was that great flaw. Moshe Rabbeinu breaks the tablets, that's his Aveira Lishma, to demonstrate to Hashem that this is our human flaw that is within us. And that essentially is the breaking of the glass at the wedding. That is our Aveira Lishma. In other words, because ultimately, think about it, when a chassan and kala get married, it's a holy event. But really, what is the chassan thinking? What is the kala thinking? They want to be a husband and wife together. So there's the human frailty and the human flaw that is also motivating this marriage as well. And so that's the breaking of the glass. That's sort of the destructive aspect of the flaw within human nature that we acknowledge and allow ourselves to use to go forward nonetheless and still realize the spiritual greatness that is within the chuppah itself. Okay? So, something to think about. Have a good day. We'll see you in 2 weeks in Ritz Hashem.